Hey there, welcome back, and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren. I'm joined today by David Edey, a certified executive advisor with over 35 years of experience in the financial planning industry, specializing in estate and legacy planning. He's the author of the best-selling book, Executor Help: How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights, and hosts the Executor Help Podcast, guiding individuals to secure their legacies and maintain family harmony. Thanks for joining me, David.
Lauren, it's a pleasure to be here. It's
So,
just before you hit record, the amazing conversation we had before. This is going to be fun. So
it's going to be fun, and we're going to have to recreate some of it, frankly. So I hope you're ready.
we're gonna recreate. I'm not worried. I'm not worried.
So our goal for today, as it always is to make adulting easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a huge part of adulting. So today, David, we're going to talk about, as we can probably tell from your bio, estate planning and legacy. And let's start there of what is estate planning.
Okay, first off, this is probably the least sexiest topic that you're going to have on all of your shows over the 5 years you've been doing it. Estate planning. Nobody wants to talk about death. Spoiler alert, it's going to happen to all of us. But if we break it down when it comes to estate planning, it's just organizing all your assets so it can be managed and distributed after you die. In my case, my story, it started when I was sitting on a cold courtroom bench. I was listening, my heart was sinking, listening to lawyers and a judge discuss what was going to happen to my parents' assets that none of us would hold on to. My parents died within a year of each other from cancer. And what ended up happening is to settle their estate, and even though they had a will, it took us 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 in lawyers' fees. And everything that I went through ended up affecting my own life and health situation, ended up having a triple bypass surgery, going through all that tough times. Again, estate planning weighed on me so much that it made me think about how utterly unprepared we were, not only for the death of my parents, but everything that goes with it. And we were just so utterly unprepared. So now, we're going to have that conversation. Is that why it's so important to have an estate plan? Now, I took the easy way and said, well, yeah, that's if you have a will. But if you don't have a will, there's an estate plan, and the government has one set up, because if you die without a will, you died intestate. So you can have, the will where you say everything what you want to be distributed and how you want things to go, or you can have the government plan. And how do you think that one's going to go? You think
I imagine it's going to be incredibly inefficient, expensive, not going to make any sense, and take a really long time.
And you left out another word, messy. It's going to be messy. Okay, so you can have an estate plan where you can be in control, or you could have the government plan. It's up to you how you want your assets to be distributed and how you want your family to proceed going forward.
So when we think of estate planning, I think the number one thing we do think about is a will, but there's more to it than that. Or else we would have just said, we're going to talk about wills today.
No, estate planning is more than just a will. It could be trusts, it could be power of attorney, it could be healthcare directives. These are all components of what makes a good estate plan. A healthcare directive might come up, but you're still alive. But the will is only going to come up because you're only going to die once. But you might be still alive and use your healthcare directives in terms of a power of attorney. You're incapacitated and you can't speak for yourself, and you want your assets to be managed, or the will kicks in once you have passed away. And that's where you would pick someone known as an executor to make sure that your wishes are carried out.
So when you have an estate, I feel like lay people, when we hear this, it's like we're talking about like Michael Jackson and like his estate, Tom Petty and his estate. Is it just for rich people?
No, it's not an episode of Succession or Yellowstone. This is long as you have some money in the bank, you got a car, you have some assets, a couple of investments. They've been listening to you for a long time, so they've started to build up their real estate portfolio. You now have an estate. So it's not just for rich people. Only thing is, the same policies, that the rich people have to follow when they're doing their estate plan. They still have to prepare their executor. They still have to have the conversations with their family. You brought up Michael Jackson. That's still a mess because even though he had a will, there's still problems with the estate. When you talk about Tom Petty, actually, I think I talk about him in my book as well. There's a problem with not having conversations. So having a will and having your estate plan is only one component. If you want to make sure that you leave a legacy and not a legacy and a mess, you want to prepare your executor. You want to have conversations with your family because you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. Believe me, I know.
And so estate planning, I think another thing that people think about is it's all about taxes. It's all about like tax efficiency and avoiding taxes and things like that. But that's not really it either, although I'm sure that's a component of it.
It is a component, but it's also other parts because you're leaving the job to the executor, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, what makes a good executor. You're leaving that job to the executor. So you want to prepare your executor to make sure that the least amount of taxes are paid. You want to prepare your executor, make sure that they have access to an accountant. There's three professionals you need to have in your estate plan to help your executor make sure that your estate is settled properly. One is the accountant. It's going to help you be as tax efficient as possible. You want to have a lawyer that's going to help you through any legal problems because you might have problems with the beneficiaries that might want to take you to court. And also the third one is a financial planner to make sure that the assets are going to be distributed the way you want and they could be invested until they're properly distributed to the beneficiaries. So it's not just about the taxes. It's about being organized and make sure that you don't leave a mess for your family.
So why, just give me like a high level answer. Why is estate planning so important?
Because if you don't, you're going to leave your family disorganized and in chaos. Everybody has a story about a family that they're not talking to each other because there was a damaging family fight, and it's all born out of silence. Actually, there's three types of families. There's a family that's going to talk about that aren't going to talk about money because if you talk about death, that they believe that's going to become a reality. Then there's a type of family that's going to have the conversations, they're going to have the will, but they're not going to let anybody know what's in the will or what's going to be left to anybody. So they let the paperwork do the talking, which can leave a mess because then people have hurt feelings and they're going to have fights. Or there's the third family that understand that the next generation to pass on that generational wealth, and a lot of people use that word, throw it out, generational wealth. But the generational wealth usually doesn't get to the second, most of the time it only gets to the second generation, doesn't go on to the third or the fourth because there hasn't been any planning. There hasn't been any conversations. There is an understanding about values of what we've accumulated and how can we pass it on to the next generation. So those three types of families, if you're in the third type of family, that's the family you want to head towards in terms of make sure that we pass on the wealth to the next generations so that there's least amount of fights. I always say that you really don't want to be in intensive care and find out that there's no will, and you never have a meaningful conversation with somebody when they're on a respirator. So you need to make sure that you've had those plans, you've had those conversations, and you're preparing the next generation by having open and honest conversations with the family. I have a friend that was I have in my book, Danielle, and she's adulting. She's in her 30s, and she recently started to do make sure she had her estate plan in place because she remembers as a child that her mother she lost at age 9, and then her father had passed away at age 12. Her father didn't have a will. And she remembers distinctly that in the funeral home parking lot, one aunt took her by the hand and another aunt took her brother by the hand. And she remembers distinctly because her father not having a will, there was no discussion of what would happen to the estate, what would happen to her and her brother. So what had happened is, even though she's a successful business person today, she remembers that anytime that she needed her aunt needed money for schooling or after school activities or anything like that, she would always have to petition the court because the court was the in charge of the money for the estate. So she made sure that she didn't want that to happen to her kids when she does have them or the next generation. So that's why it's so important to have the estate plan. And it's not about even how much assets you have. It's about the age. You're never too young to have an estate plan.
That's true. That's definitely true. I think a lot of people do it when they have kids because of like what you're talking about when they pass away, they need to know literally where are their kids going, right? And how are they going to be taken care of? But you're absolutely right. And we were talking about this off mic, but don't have my will yet. I told my dad didn't have one. I was like, all right, my dad doesn't have one. Like, what the heck? And so I was like, all right, both of us by the end of 2024 are going to have wills. And he just did his. So I'm up. It's my turn. And it's interesting not having children and being young
Mhm.
because basically the people that are going to be in our will as our beneficiaries are going to be older than us, which
Mhm.
is a little bit of an interesting dynamic that we're dealing with too. But maybe that will make those conversations easier to understand
Okay,
for everybody.
first back up. Before you had hit record, you had told me this. I fell off my chair. I had to sit back up because we talked about your holdings. Now, let's just use you as an example. Imagine you own several rental properties. Without an estate plan, your family's going to struggle to manage these properties if you pass away. If you have an estate plan, they'll know exactly what to do. They'll be able to carry on in terms of, do you want the assets to be sold? Do you want them to be put in a trust? What do you want to do? Right now, it's kind of like the wild, wild west with you. But you got to the age of you got to the end of the year because this is 2024 when we're taping this. You got to the end of the year for you and your significant other to have that conversation and get those wills done. And if I have to phone you up, once we get off this and I get your phone number, if I have to phone you up to continuously badger you, I will do that. I will take that upon myself. See
That's
what I'm
fine.
doing for you?
I know. I know. Hey, it needs to be done. There is a little bit of a feeling, and this is wrong. This is wrong. I know. I've been doing this. I took a whole graduate course in financial planning from Boston University, the
Mhm.
kind of like the prep for the CFP thing, which I never did the CFP, but I took the courses. And so I know it's bad. At the end of the day, there is no kid in a parking lot at the funeral home that's going to be left out in the cold when we die. And
Okay.
I do this thing, and this is wrong too. I know. But like we're 32 and 35. The odds of us dying are so small, and the odds of us dying at the same time are so small that we haven't done it. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it. I'm doing it this year. We're doing it this year. And I am going to we've been doing a lot of thinking about, like you said, what do we do with the properties? And we're going to have them just be sold. We had this, adorable idea that like, oh, my sister will maybe get this one, and like my husband's parents will get this one. And like, no, we're not doing it. Like everything's going to be sold. So we have made some decisions in that direction. So we kind of know what we want to go in there, which I think is at least a step in the right direction.
Okay, so that's great. You've told me everything what you'd like to do. God forbid something happens to either one of you, that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
So you need to. Okay, I'm gonna grant you, you're doing, at least you've had the conversation. Okay, this about, hey, we're 32, 35. Nobody knows when it's going to happen. You don't know when your number is going to be up.
for sure.
But because of the success that you've had, you need to get serious about this. Again, this is not sexy. Nobody wants to talk about this. But we have to break away from being afraid about procrastinating. And then there's also the apathy of, well, I'm dead. What will it matter? Well, it will matter because it's going to be a mess, and if the government's going to be the one that's going to be in charge of your estate. So in your case, it's sooner rather than later that this has to take place. Flip it the other side. It's great that your dad has done something, but also in your age group, you're also going to be put into the situation where you might be named as executors. So you need to have that conversation. Your dad has to prepare you to be the executor being an executor is the worst job in life that you can have, because just to settle an estate, on average, it takes anywhere between 100 hours or 18 to 24 months to settle a estate if everything's in order. In my case, it took 7 years, and my parents had a will. So now you're asking someone to deal with the tax department, deal with beneficiaries, to make sure the house is sold. You're asking them to do a myriad of jobs. So as an executor and as the person is the testator whose will it is, estate that you're preparing, you want to have the conversations. You want to know where everything is going to be kept. How can I get in touch of where's the will going to be kept? Who's the lawyer? Who's the accountant? Make it as easy as possible on the executor who's taking on the responsibilities. Another thing we didn't talk about are digital assets. That's everything you've ever written, anything you've ever stored, everything you've ever done on a computer in the cloud. For every email address, there's at least 160 digital identities related to that email address. That means your Netflix, it means Amazon, it means your banking, all of those things. If you haven't got that list prepared, and if something was to happen, how is somebody going to get into your computer? How is somebody going to get into the cell phone? How is somebody going to get into a tablet to make sure that your banking situation is stopped? The bills are going to be not going to be going through your social media accounts. Now, a friend of mine passed away a couple of years ago. I can tell that her husband, who's the executor, doesn't know her digital assets, because just last week it popped up on LinkedIn, her job anniversary, and then Facebook came up a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago as well. So, and I have it in my book, each social media company has their own protocol in terms of how to shut down the assets. But if we don't taking care of the digital assets, that also could become a mess. So the digital assets
Yeah.
also have to be part of your estate plan. Have you got a
Yep.
list of where all your logins and passwords are?
No. I have we have my husband and I have our rental property business. And so those emails that we both have access to are the backup email for everything. And those are most of the logins. So if something happens to me, I think he can get into all my stuff. But if something happens to both of us, absolutely not. Nobody's getting in anywhere.
Okay, so that's another part that you have to your estate plan. But again, you said by the end of 2024, all of this is
Yep.
all organized.
And you know
Okay.
what? We've been talking about doing it for a long time. Um, my husband and I couldn't really agree on what we were going to do, but I think we've gotten through that because I have siblings and we have a niece and nephew and a new niece being born in a couple weeks on my side, and then his side, no siblings and divorced parents. And so it's an interesting dynamic on both sides and trying to be equitable to both sides of the equation and all of that. So we finally have talked through a lot of that, and I think we have that all figured out. But it took a while. But what really we had to do, David, was we had to create the deadline for ourselves. So we've talked through all of that. And then it was basically, I really wanted my dad to do one. And he's like, well, you don't have one. I'm like, all right, let's set a deadline and we're both going to do it by then. And so I think honestly, if that's an approach that people need to take, give yourself a deadline and then do it by that date.
Are you the executive for your dad's will, or you don't know?
I think I am. I mean, obviously the round one of their wills is
Each
goes to
other.
my mom, goes to my dad. Yeah.
Right.
He
But even
literally did it like last week. So like but like the next step is get a meeting on the calendar for us to go over their house, talk through their will, and then get ours going. Like that's it. This is like late breaking news, really, in my family.
what usually happens, even if your mom is the executor, she's going to be lost because 99% of most people have no idea what to do. And she's going to be leaning on you. So even if she is the executor, your dad has to have the conversation, say, he, you know what, something is to happen. That's why you need to advocate having a bright colored envelope, either bright yellow, bright orange, because if something was to happen, people are traumatized, and you can't find anything when they're
Yeah.
traumatized. So you say, you know what? If something was to happen, go to this bright orange envelope. Inside there, you're going to find the insurance policies. You're going to find my will. You're going to find my logins and passwords. Everything that you need to know is going to be in that brightly colored envelope. Okay, because everybody's going to be looking around everywhere, and people are traumatized. You've got indescribable grief. So the biggest gift that you can give to your family is to be organized, and it'll mean a lot more to them because you don't want to remember for what you didn't do. You want to remember what you did do. You made it easier on your family because there's only going to be disorganization and chaos once this happens.
Oh, the other thing my parents just did is they remodeled part of their house and they're putting in a safe. And so that's all that was also part of the estate plan was the safe so somebody knows how to get in there and then that's where all that stuff is. Because I have a fear of somebody breaking in and stealing my bright red folder with all my passwords in it and being able to get into my computer while I'm like alive, while it's in the holding spot for my executor in the future, you know?
Well, even if they break in and find your bright yellow envelope, you would put it somewhere. Maybe you put it in a safety deposit box, but you have to let the executor know
Right.
because you've got to make it easier for you. You're trying to make the job easier on your family, make the job easier on your executor. Yeah, you haven't got kids, but if you did have kids, make it easier on the person that's are going to look after your kids. Have the conversations. Who do we want to look after our kids? Who do we want to tuck in our kids each night if we weren't here? So you want to have that conversation. So it's all about conversations. We can break the silent the circle the silence the cycle of silence. We can think about and talk about and prepare for death. We can make it easy on our families because they're going to be going through an indescribable amount of pain and grief, and the easier you can make it on them, the better it's going to be.
That's something that I think not enough people talk about. And this is, I was having this conversation about like life insurance with somebody recently too. You know, it's like you don't want money and all of those things, all of those complications to be a problem when you're also grieving the loss of someone. Like you were, I don't think I have not lost a parent. And so, but you have, and I don't know, did you know what that was going to feel like before it happened? Or was it like way worse than you even potentially met? Like you don't know how you're going to be.
I can tell you, you you feel your life is going down a straight path, and then when you lose a parent or lose both parents, your life slightly goes off to the left or to the right because you're never going to be the same.
Yeah.
Because I miss hearing their voices every day. And they always say your mother is your first, as a son, your mother's your first love affair. And to lose them is the hardest thing that you ever, and that's why you always want to have, never take it for granted that you have them there. Because when they're gone and you don't have those conversations or you don't hear their voices anymore, it's going to be the hardest thing and it's going to change the trajectory of your life, bar none.
And that is happening at the same time you are wading through a very complicated and fraught process that you've never gone through before.
Exactly. Exactly. That's
That's
why I
what not
said,
enough people think about. That's why it has to be easy. And we haven't even talked really about, and this is obviously a big part of your book, the interpersonal relationships between like siblings and other family members. Like adding that on top of it, you've got this complicated process. You're grieving, but what? You're also fighting with your siblings and your aunts and uncles and cousins. That's horrible. That's terrible. Like you got to do as much as you can to keep that from happening.
because a lot of people will say, "Oh, when I speak to groups and stuff, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're an idiot. You have no idea how great my family is. We all get along." Believe me, you don't know about somebody until, like I said before, until you have to share an inheritance with them. People
Yeah.
will turn on a dime and change the way they are. Um, my siblings I had to go to court with. We haven't spent the holidays together since my parents passed away in 2011. We no
Oh,
longer see each other. We don't get along. And it's because there's people change when it comes to an estate. People lose their minds. There's a sense of entitlement. And where my parents fell down when it came to the estate planning is they never had the conversations with us. They never said, this is what's going to be happening. I mean, I knew I've been a financial advisor over 35 years. They came in my office. They had the will done. I knew it was in the will. It was split three ways. It was split three ways, but one sibling sibling never thought it being equal was fair. So they petitioned. They felt that they should get more than the other siblings. And that's where and I said, that's just wrong. But if our parents would have sat us down and say, I don't want any fights. This is what we've decided. I think that would make it a lot easier. For my book,
Yeah.
I did interviewed a mediator, and he was saying that a lot of children would wait to fight over the estate when the parents had passed away because there's a lot of harboring of as childhood nonsense that's gone on. But he says what he's seeing now is that our children are fighting over the estate while the parents are alive, in terms of telling them not to spend so much money. They're trying to get them put in homes so that they can control their parents, that sort of thing like that. So, and the story that stuck out the most for me is that he, as a mediator, he had this family that he was mediating, and they millions of dollars. And he said that there's two brothers, and he thought he was close to getting a consensus that they were going to get an agreement. And he said to one brother, well, this brother says we're going to do this, and he's agreed to it. And the other brother says, no, I don't trust him. He's a thief. And he says, why did you call him that? He says, well, when he was 12 years old, he stole a chocolate bar from a store, and he didn't tell our parents. He's a thief, and I don't trust him now. And these are grown men. So every family is messy. Every
Mm.
family has got one or two. It doesn't matter. They've got somebody in there to can upset the apple cart, and people that you never thought would act this way, you look at them and say, "But you weren't like this at the Thanksgiving Day table or at Christmas." Who are these people? When I was sitting in court, I had an out-of-body experience. I'm going, my parents are spinning in their grave, and I'm looking over at the sibling, and I'm going, "Who is this person? I have no idea who." And
Well,
the
nobody's in their right mind either. I mean, grief, and that could obviously, depending on your thought patterns and your physiology, can lead to depression, anxiety, mental health, true mental health issues. I mean, I don't see how you can be yourself. You can't be yourself. You're never the same person after your parents die anyways. But if you're going through all this extra stuff too, I mean, getting things, this concept, this has been very fascinating for me. The concept of equal cannot be equitable in people's minds is fascinating to me. And even if you just look at my siblings, I'm the oldest. I'm also the most financially well off. My brother's only 2 years younger than me. I don't think he would have a problem with me saying I'm better financially off than he is. But he's married, has two kids, one on the way. And then my sister is 11 years younger than him. And so if you were trying to right a ship in a way where, all right, well, I'm not going to give them equal stuff, but it's like, well, we give Lauren less because she has more money, and we need to give Jenny more because she doesn't get to spend as much time with us. And so she didn't get all those Christmases and birthdays and everything that, the other two have. And then it's like, but what about Alex? Like, maybe he should get the most because he has the three kids, or should we just pay for the kids' school? Or like, if you don't do a third, a third, a third, it gets very complicated, and I think worse, trying to level it up in your own way. But like you said, the conversation needs to happen. And my parents told us it's a third, a third, a third. And I think we're all good with that as far as I know.
Yeah, they had that conversation third to third, but you never know. Someone might change. But it's as much as and that's why I'm a big advocate for having the conversations. Don't let the paperwork do the talking. Don't let this be done in silence. You have to have the conversations. They at the bottom line is you and your husband, you can do whatever you want with your estate. You can give it to pet rescue. You can do anything you want. You don't have to give anybody anything. That's why with a will and an estate plan, you get to say what you want. You go the other route with the government, then there's going to be intestate rules, and and that may not be what you want. Will go to siblings and not maybe not in the percentages you want. But with the estate plan, your will, you say exactly what you want, and you can do whatever you want. You don't owe anybody anything, but you also should have a conversation. If something was to happen to me, this is what I'm leaving you. They may like it or may not like it. Doesn't matter. It's your stuff. You can do whatever
Yeah.
you want.
She has my mom and my uncle, and she's leaving everything to my uncle. And that has not gone over well, in case you're wondering.
And she told everybody this, or just your uncle?
Everybody, I mean, I know, obviously, like she's still
Okay, but
alive. Yeah.
okay.
No,
Does your
we
mom?
know. She keeps asking me what of her jewelry I want because that's all me and my
Okay,
mom get is
okay,
her
but you
Walmart jewelry.
okay. Don't judge. Don't
I'm like,
judge.
yeah, it's emotional, right? But my mom and my parents are way better off than my uncle, and my grandma has just decided that he needs it more than she does, and then it'll just go to me, my brother, and my sister after he dies. Is like her thought process. I'm thinking some girl's gonna like move in and on my uncle and like try to take it from him and whatever. But it's up to her. It's her money, and that's what she wants to do with it. I mean,
Her
there's
money,
nothing.
and she's had the conversations with her. So
Yeah.
don't. So suppose she didn't have that conversation. You've got your Hallmark jewelry, and all of a sudden, oh my God, you start clutching your pearls. Oh my God, I can't believe Grandma did that. No, she's had the conversations. Everybody understands. They may or
She's
may
had
not.
the conversation, but if she hadn't, the last 10 years would have been a lot more fun for her because her and my mom would have spoken more.
Yeah.
Since that conversation, that has been a very fraught relationship. And I've had to be the bridge really between them for the last, that was 2015. So it's been 9 years. So
So
this is the tricky part, right? Like if you're gonna do something a little bit completely wackadoo, completely off kilter, not equitable in any way, um, then when you do have that conversation, you have to be ready for those consequences too.
exactly. But you see what I said? All families are messy. All
Yeah,
families, oh, we're all great. No, everybody's got their own little issues. And that's why you want to be as open as possible. Again, the testator, they can do whatever they want with their estate. Some people may not like it, but there's nothing you can do but have those conversations. And even if you do have those conversations, I've seen cases where people will still go to court and try and fight it for the sake
that's
of.
the strangest part. That's the strangest part of it when
I,
that happens.
I'll tell you why. Because talking to mediators, and I felt the same thing too, you want your day in court. You believe, and I remember saying that, I remember thinking it too, is that if I just get in front of the judge, I first off, you have to understand, this is not an episode of Law and Order, eh? You're not done in 48 minutes. This is a long, drawn out process. You're sitting in the hallways, you're looking at each other, where you'd like to go over and choke the other side, but you got to go through all of this. So it's not an episode of Law and Order, but when you get in there, you have the mentality. And I remember, if I just get in front of the judge, I will let them see what a moron they are, how stupid these people are, and how greedy they are. But it doesn't go that way. It still came down to two lawyers and a judge fighting over my parents' assets. And I also remember sitting there going, we're seeing either one of these three people at our at our table at Christmas time. I don't remember saying, "Hey, can you pass the cranberry sauce?" Neither of these three, but they got to decide because the other side decided that we had to end up in court. So there's also this thought that if I just go to court, they're going to. I just need my day in court, and this is where
Yeah.
we're going to.
And they're
And
gonna like the judge is gonna like me better or
yeah,
something. But I mean, it
you're
comes down to the rule of law and the contracts. I
going to
mean,
see that there are more, and the only people that benefit are the lawyers.
lawyers, of
They're on the
course.
clock. Tick, 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 tick. So, yeah, I have a friend. His family had a family cottage, and the brother. There's five kids, and the two of the brothers. The parents died. Father got killed in and hit by an 18-wheeler. His mother was had a stroke and she couldn't talk. They got the kids together and told her what had happened. They don't know if there was a will. They had to go into the house and see if there was a will. They figured out there is no will, but there was a cottage that they had worked on for years and years. Two of the brothers took on the responsibility of being executors. And then they wanted to charge, even though the estate was going to be split, they wanted to charge a fee for being
Yeah.
executors. And
You
then
can
they
you can do that. You can do that.
you can do, but it's also double dipping. If you're going to be a beneficiary, don't also
Right.
take a piece of the action from the estate. So it's the he had to end up going to court to fight his brothers. Here again, the five of them don't talk anymore, but he said that the only reason why you end up going to court and the only people that make money are the lawyers. They're the ones that get the bigger cottages because you're paying for they're paying the big fees. In my case, it was $50,000.
So here's my last question for you. Is there anything that anybody can do that's listening today to work on their estate plan or make things easier if something were to happen to them?
I'd say start by making a list of your assets, deciding who should get what. I'd say choose an executor who you would, because it's a very big favor you're asking of somebody. A lot of people take on the job because they say, "Oh, it's quite a an honor to do this," but you also want to set them up for success because you're asking them to do, like I said, a pretty big job that nobody really wants. So once you've set up your made a list of your assets, you've picked an executor, then you need to decide, well, who am I going to see? Some people will go to a lawyer, and that's a great because you can have conversations and they can decide if you need what type of estate plan in terms of do you need trusts? How's your will going to be set up? That sort of thing. And there's also the people like to do it on their own. Just go online and do a DIY. Either one is fine, but understand you get what you pay for because you might get stuck with some of the questions if you do it online. And there's nothing wrong with doing online. The point is do something because if you don't have a plan, like I said before, the government has a plan for you. Then once you've organized and you've got your will and your healthcare directives, your power of attorney, all that sort of stuff set up, then you want to prepare your executor, as I said before, have that conversation. And then you also want to have the conversation with your family members. Let them know this is what I've done. Now let's flip it the other way. In your case, say your dad didn't have the will and you didn't have your little agreement that you had going on, but you might say, "Hey, um, I was on the show, had this amazing guest talking about the importance of having an estate plan, and I've finally got myself organized. And Dad, Mom, what have you done?" So that'll open up the conversation for them to say, "Well, we haven't done anything, or we're going to leave it to you kids." But again, open it up so that you have that open conversations with the family. Again, spoiler alert, it's going to happen to all of us. We just want to, families are messy. We just want to make sure that we leave a legacy and not a legacy in a mess. All I hope for people is to have that they navigate through the tough times, the grief, and be able to prepare so that they can have, sit at the kitchen table and talk about happy memories of the person that they've lost and get over the grieving. Not sit over the kitchen table and figure out, okay, we've got a mess here. What are we going to do? So what you want to try to do is leave a legacy, not a mess, and leave a legacy of love and order, peace and remembrance.
Is there anything else you want to add before you wrap up?
Well, I think we've covered up. Do you think we missed anything? We've made sure that I'm going to get on you that you get this done. Get this done. So I think my work here is done, I believe.
Oh, I'm getting
Uh,
it done. Happening.
sure. You sure? Have you picked your executor besides you and your husband? Have you got someone else if something was happened to both of you?
I mean, it would be my dad,
Okay, but
but I
have
need like I need like a backup executor in case he
yes.
passes away after I do my
Exactly,
will. So,
exactly. And that's what you want to do with your will. Every time there are some life changes, you want to update your estate plan. There's plenty of times I've seen people have wills that are 20, 30 years old, and they're talking about what would happen to their kids, who would be the guardians when
yeah.
their kids already have their own kids, which is their grandkids now. So every time there's a life change, you want to update your will and your estate plan to keep it in line with what's going on in your life.
So, David, why don't you let people know how they can get in touch with you and find you on the interwebs?
You can just go to davidedey.com. There you can take the legacy readiness quiz, and it's asks you a bunch of questions, and it'll tell you how you score and what you need to do. You can buy my book there. I've got free resources on there, a checklist if you're an executor, what you need to know for US and also for Canada. You can get a snippet of free chapter of my book. You can get a free chapter for your listening pleasure, the audiobook version of my voice. Think of that. It's kind of like a bedtime story, but only with my voice and estate planning. You can do that. All my socials are on there. I've got my YouTube channel. Again, just go to davidedey.com and you can find me and answer all the questions. I want to thank you so much for having me on the show. This was a lot of fun, and just keep doing what you're doing because you're helping a lot of people.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
Not having your estate plan, but we're going to get that done.
We're going to get done. And guys, all of that I will put in the show notes as well. So the website and all of David's socials. I am on Twitter X at Adulting is Easy, Instagram at Adulting is Easy Real, YouTube at Adulting is Easy. If you like this episode, I think you'll also like episode 33, Going in the Wayback Machine, 5 talks you should have with your parents. One of those was about estate planning. Also, episode 159, what to do when you inherit a property or bequeath one. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, David and I have made adulting a little easier for you.